Quite a big domino just fell in the Penn State football recruiting class of 2026, and we're here to talk about it. By we, I mean me. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Welcome to the latest breaking news committed video series here on the YouTube channel for Blue White Illustrated. For those of you who are new, first off, hi, subscribe to the channel. I think we do good work here. I think you're going to enjoy this video and others that you may notice here on the channel. But for everybody that knows how this usually works, I'm usually here with Ryan Snyder or Sean Fitz, recruiting reporters for BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, that give you all the information about the who, what, when, where, all that kind of stuff. And then I follow up on the back end with some of the football things from the X's and O's perspective, on-field personality, traits, things like that I think are important, to the overall conversation. Well, I'm doing both today because both of our guys are previously disposed this afternoon, and quarterbacks can't wait. Quarterbacks are super important, and that's what we have here. So you saw it in the video title if you clicked on this, but Peyton Falzone, Penn State football recruiting class of 2026, has joined the Nittany Lions Saturday evening. Here in the On3 industry ranking, you see him 206 overall, the 11th athlete overall in the class of 2026 nationally, and the 5th overall player in the state of PA, according to those industry rankings, which are a composite of all of the different rankings out there from the 4 major recruiting services. He is a consensus 4-star, no matter where you look, but at On3, probably a little bit lower in terms of where he ranks. 290th overall in the On 300, 13th athlete, and 8th overall. Now, you're going to hear athlete a lot here to start, but to be clear, Peyton Falzone is a quarterback for Penn State. He's been accepted, his commitment has been accepted as a quarterback, and that's how they see him. Pretty much full stop. So that's a very big deal and a very big swing in where this sits in his recruitment, because that has been a part of the conversation for a guy who is unbelievably athletic. And we'll get into all of that here on the backside. We're gonna hit on some of the ups and downs, the bumps in the journey here, according to how this all kind of shaped up. So camped at Penn State last year in June. June 9th, to be precise, I believe, is what from what I recall. We were out there watching him and the other quarterbacks at that camp throw. He was not the number one quarterback target out there. I believe there was a 2027 quarterback, and it might have even been Troy Huhn. I apologize for not having that off the top of my head. But there were a couple of notable quarterbacks, and he stood out in that particular weekend because he's almost 6'5", might as well call him, 205 pounds, and ran a 4.5. And then you look at the other composite athletic testing metrics, and they're all just unbelievable. And, from a size perspective, arm length, all these things, he checks all the boxes, to the point that after the day was over, after the camp was over, they had him running routes. And the conversation about him being an athlete at Penn State, potentially playing tight end, was born that day. Now, to be clear, in every step of this process, Peyton Falzone has maintained through his actions that he wants to be a quarterback. He sees himself as a quarterback. And the conversations, which you can check out at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, got a lot of great information up there already. Kind of paint that picture of a guy who wanted to be quarterback, but is, grew up a Penn State fan. Clearly, this offer meant a lot to him, and he wanted to be a quarterback for Penn State, but obviously was open to the idea, at least at some point in the journey, of maybe he could be not a quarterback here. That all changed. So what happened was he went to Virginia Tech. They recruited him as a quarterback only. He commits to that program. And then during the season last year, he starts after he starts to play some and his tape gets out there, he starts taking other visits. Penn State, high on the list, Ohio State, Wisconsin. And then the shoe falls where he decommits from Virginia Tech. So there was movement in terms of his performance during the season, and then the projection of where he might go. Fast forward to the spring, I believe he took an official visit to Iowa at some point. There hasn't been a whole lot of, reaction to that, because quickly after, he committed to Penn State pretty soon after. He was also one of the players that came to Penn State's playoff game against SMU, had to pay their way to go to that game, sit in the sub-zero temperatures, was out there. That's been something we're following here in terms of players that went to that game that later become Penn State recruits, because that's a big part of, if you're going to pay your way and do all those things, you're obviously very interested in being a Penn State Nittany Lion in the future. And that's what happened with Peyton Falzone. Now, the reason he was a athlete prospect and where there was some hesitation from some other big programs is because of his passing mechanics, his throwing motion in particular, which we've talked about here on the channel, on the recruiting show quite a few times. It was not last year a good throwing motion for him to efficiently deliver the ball to his receivers routinely. And I'm going to get into all of that here on the back end. So that's just a fact we're going to deal with here, that was a part of his recruiting journey. And then I'll give you my opinion in the assessment of what I watched with the full game film a little bit later. But that was a hang up for a lot of schools, not just Penn State. Well, after his junior season, he started working with Brad Mendler, the quarterback coach, passing coach for Drew Aller and for Ethan Grunkmeyer. And another, not just those are the Penn State quarterbacks. He's actually coached a lot of quarterbacks in their mechanics that have gone to other schools, not just Penn State products. So Mendler building a great reputation as a quarterback whisperer in the mechanics and throwing motion department. He starts working with Falzone this offseason, and the transition, the ability, we've seen some highlights here, has been impressive to the point that Penn State pulled the trigger and has offered him fully as a quarterback. And that is, I think, meaningful in this particular conversation that that's evidence, in my opinion, that the progression has happened in terms of his ability to change his mechanics, what he does, how he does it, and the ability for him to play the quarterback position, where he's not just an athlete out there. So that's where we stand in terms of the timeline of how these things happened to get him to that point as a football player. Now, on the side of he's always seen himself as a quarterback, I got to tell you, I was really impressed with the fact that he was willing to drive to Ohio every single week since December, once a week, to work with Mendler. There are certain things that just your actions prove what you think of. Your actions say more than your words. The willingness to do that tells me that he is willing to be a quarterback. He's willing to put in the work to be a quarterback. So that decision changed my opinion on whether or not he was going to change his throwing motion. Some of the other things that I think are important in this particular conversation when it comes to the story of how we got here, I'll get to that in a second. The first thing I want to say is if you want to get the full film room, which I'm going to get to here in just one moment, please subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I always forget to say it in these particular videos, but I want you to know, you can get all this information sooner if you go to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, you subscribe for $1, and you get access to our recruiting content and all of our premium articles and things like that. We're also doing a contest right now between now and the Blue White game. If you subscribe here to the YouTube channel, we're going to pick 5 winners around Blue White weekend that are going to win a subscription to the site for a year. So you can get in on all that stuff for free. But, the odds are we've had hundreds of people subscribe here to the channel. You can do that, or you can just go subscribe right away. I think either are a great option. Okay, let's talk about him as a passer. He's not so far off on the mechanics side that it can't be fixed. His footwork is pretty good. His overall, and this is the nuanced part, his accuracy isn't bad despite his throwing motion. There is an intentionality to a lot of what he does at quarterback, but that motion, which you're going to see again here, and again, ignore the athlete tag, that's not going to work at the next level because there's it's a big windup. You can see his throwing motion pulls his back foot off the ground. So everything you see him doing, he's doing basically with his upper body most of the time. So in terms of sequencing his body and getting the power from his legs through his arm, that's more of what we're talking about instead of he doesn't have a weird rotation where he brings his elbow out and it looks painful because he's moving his whole upper body a lot of times where he's using, I'm doing a poor job of describing what you can see on film here, but it is fixable. It's not so far off that you don't imagine he can do these things, especially if he's got a good coach that's proven to be able to fix throwing motions and kind of understand the sequencing and getting them to play at a high level like Mendler has. So on that side of things, I actually am pretty confident that he's going to turn into a quarterback that can play the position and will be all these tools and all these abilities will translate. You can see the arm strength. And the funny thing is, when he does that, some of the throwing on the run stuff, and he does that jump pass, that's actually limiting his power. There's more strength and ball velocity to mine from this prospect than he's shown already. And he's already in the conversation of strong arms that Penn State has recruited, in the Aller and Grunkmeyer category. So that's crazy. You throw the athleticism in there where he might be the most athletically gifted of Penn State's project quarterbacks in a while. And you've got a guy who has theoretical and potentially unlimited upside. He could be the complete quarterback, the Justin Fields level athlete and thrower combined. And I use that intentionally. That is where his ceiling is in terms of guys that we've seen that Penn State has recruited or tried to get on campus. Tommy Stevens, whatever you want. My biggest issues after watching his film were more on the mental side of things, where there is a propensity to chuck it deep. And you see it here on his highlights. You see this, the scrambling, the playing out of structure, throwing on the run, deep shots galore. He's got basically a whole highlight reel of just bombs. And that's how he operates the offense. The offense is an up-tempo spread system that puts a lot of conflict on defenses to play space, and that opens up the opportunity for slants and digs and short routes and then deep passes. And my biggest issue with Falzone was that I think too often you can goad him into taking the deep ball. And so there is this conversation around him of he's not accurate. His completion percentage was 50-some% last year, right? Completion percentage, raw completion percentage doesn't tell the full story. There is some context. If you're chucking bombs all the time, I mean, let's just say conservatively, it's a 60-40 proposition, right? So you're maybe at 60% to begin with. Let's say there are some other issues, high school receivers, et cetera, et cetera. You're throwing too many of them. It's pretty easy to shave off 7-8% from your completion percentage if you're not routinely taking those underneath passes. And so there is a little bit of hero ball in Peyton Falzone that I think he needs to work through. And that's going to be the biggest thing for me from the long-term projection of, is he that guy? Is he the guy that's going to be the next great quarterback at Penn State who's going to fulfill all of this talent? It's more to me on the mental side than it is on the physical side of changing the throwing motion. Because again, I think that part of that is I'm assuming he's going to do that. He's doing all the things necessary to make that happen. He's, going to the right coach. He's putting in the time. He's putting in the work. He's shown through this whole process, hey, I'm a quarterback and I'm going to do things necessary to be a quarterback. And I don't find any reason anymore to doubt him. So then to me, the focus shifts onto what do you do between the lines? And I think he's got some work to do. Now I'm going to shift this into the other conversation around the class of 2026. And the number one question I've gotten, both from friends, from people on the message board, from people on the internet at large, is what does this do to Troy Huhn, Penn State's committed quarterback in the class of 2026 already from California? Are they going to be able to keep both of these guys in the class? So let's break it down. Troy Huhn was just here on campus for 6 days. Penn State, from the way they operate, they don't hide these things. They're up front. They talk about competition. They talk about what the plan is for your position. Not all of the details, not all of the nitty gritty, but they don't hide the fact that they would like to add 2 quarterbacks in the class. And if they can, they're going to try and do that. Huhn has been on board this whole time. And like I said, he was just here for an extended period of time. I would be flabbergasted if he was surprised by this decision. I'm assuming he went into this knowing that was part of the case. Now, our guys are going to do more on that. We're going to reach out to, the available people to talk to, get you more on that end. But if you're worried that he's going to jump ship, I would not put a lot of stock in that right now. And then on the other side, Falzone just committed. And everything that he's done in this process, from camping at Penn State, not getting the decision he wanted, going to Virginia Tech, decommitting, and then throwing everything possible into being a quarterback and going to a guy that Penn State trusts, I think it all points to he clearly wants to be a Penn State quarterback. So if you got 2 guys that feel that way, I don't know where the problem is in this class. Now, competition is going to do what competition does. And if you look at the roster, there's currently a quarterback competition for the QB2 in spring. And after Drew Aller leaves, there's going to be some upheaval in the class, on the roster, most likely. I don't want to be naive. I don't want to say everybody's going to transfer, but we are in modern college football. That's a part of the conversation at a position where only one player can actually start. So they're going to need numbers. They didn't get 2 last year, and they very much wanted 2 last year, both early and late. So this makes a lot of sense from a quarterback roster building perspective. And I do want to circle back to 2025 because I think this matters. I think this particular conversation around what happened with Matt Zollers and Malik Washington is a really important how this informs how they treated Falzone. So for those that don't know, Matt Zollers, Beckham Kritza committed in November of 2024. And then they tried to go after their second quarterback in the class. Essentially, they got their upside quarterback before they got their quarterback in the class. And so there was a decision to make between, do we go for Matt Zollers or do we go for Malik Washington? Malik Washington, very much early on in his, based on the visits, I think he took like 7 visits to Penn State, very much wanted to be a Penn State quarterback. But Penn State kept him at arm's length, didn't accept the commitment because they wanted to go for Zollers, who they saw as a higher ceiling, higher floor player, a guy that was going to be the guy in the class. Well, Zollers commits to Missouri. That doesn't really work out for them. And so then they're left with 2 guys that maybe are the upside, but also a guy that at that point they were still pursuing Zollers throughout the entirety of the process up to the very end. So Malik Washington wasn't really in the picture for them. Had they accepted Malik Washington's commitment, maybe things go differently. Maybe they don't, but they have a guy that turned out to be a very, very good quarterback prospect in 2025 who commits to Maryland. And so they missed out on Malik Washington. And I think in terms of sacrificing the good in pursuit of great, I don't think they wanted to do that this year with a guy like Falzone, who is obviously very good and obviously has quarterback translatable traits. Now, I'm not trying to say that he's better or as good of a quarterback from the neck up or from his processing or any of that stuff as Malik Washington. I don't believe that. But Malik Washington was big, athletic, threw the ball well, all those things that you can see, you can copy and paste those traits to Falzone and work out some of the other details. So Penn State's aggressiveness in as much as they could, trying to keep Falzone in the conversation, despite having Huhn and some of the other situations, I think is informed by last year. It's a reasonable opinion, I think, to have in terms of how this all worked out. And so I think they've got a very, very good recruiting class at quarterback. You've got 2 really strong candidates, 2 guys that I think have upside, strength, size, bring different things to the table, operate different offenses. If you want more of that conversation, of course, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com is the place to go. But that's it. That's it here for right now. Peyton Falzone, Penn State quarterback in the class of 2026, joins the Nittany Lions as a spring recruit during spring practice. That's even before we get to the blue-white game. How many more are they going to get over the next couple of weeks? We'll keep you updated at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Of course, the best way, subscribe to the site. And if you haven't done that, you don't want to do anything else. You're not going to subscribe to anything. Just like the video. Helps us out. Lets everybody know this didn't suck. You enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back with the next one here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube.